Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you may see a little link down below the video, and you can click on that, and you'll end up with an opportunity to register in Zoom. Once you're in Zoom, you'll see in the chat, you'll see another link, and that'll take you to Makana. Makana is where you become one of the producers. Basically, you can ask the questions there, vote on questions, chat amongst yourselves, decide what we should be talking about. We're just kind of following your lead. So any questions that you have around media or virtual production are fair game. So we'd love to have you join us there. The first hour is generally just opened season. Any question you have. Second hour is something that we've decided to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we have some folks from Elemental and AWS here to talk about the Elemental Link. It's something that I'm actually streaming right now. If you go up to the YouTube / Lindsay, you'll see HDR3, which is a test, and that's camera out in my backyard. And it's going through the Elemental Link right now. So if you want to see what we're going to be talking about, we'll talk about how that actually works in the second hour. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about working with C-Suite. So a lot of us work with a lot of executives, and we're going to talk about some of the secrets to making that work the best. So come to that if you're interested. And so let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill?
Absolutely. Good morning, Alex, and good morning, everybody. Our first question this morning comes from Tobias Moss in Minneapolis. And Tobias asks, what was the first or pivotal moment in sending you towards the path of production and technology for a career?
Yeah, go ahead, Grant.
I guess actually it was, I was about 7 or 8 and started mixing sound sitting on my dad's knee at church. And I got all intrigued and interested. But then more recently, probably 10 years ago, I worked on this huge event where we had to rig everything. We went in there and I was working on graphics, but of course on rigging day, you're just working and you're making it all work, right? So I was in there and I was putting truss together and there was so much pressure and I'm sweating around. And as I'm sweating, I saw these 2 guys walk in and they set up a folding table. They sat down with their laptops and they sat there the whole day. And it was a technical director and a producer. And I looked over at them and I went, I want to be that. And about 2 years to the day, I was doing another event at the same thing as the technical director over the whole thing, sitting at that same table. And the other guy, the producer, now works for my company. And so it's amazing how it was a pivotal moment as I was sweating there. It changed the way I thought.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
So I started out training in the electrical industry back in the 90s and working a lot of big buildings, automation systems for building them. It was all PLCs and control cabinets. We were doing lots of automation, trying to get elevators to do things and doors and air conditioning and all that stuff. And that was just as these building management systems were coming in, computerized controls. And at the same time, big buildings were ripping out whatever historic or legacy computer systems they had and putting in Cat5 and putting PCs on everybody's desks and email. I thought, well, this is where I need to go. And that's the track I followed.
Good guy.
Yeah, back in the late 90s, I was a digital imaging technician doing a lot of retouch scanning and drum scanners and things like that. And we shared the building with an Avid editor, so he had a full suite, and he also had a music production suite as well. And he asked me to scan some photos and help him out retouching them for a production, so I did that for him. And then he saw how great it was and came over with a box of Adobe After Effects, the $1,995 box with the dongle, and said, learn this. And that was like the pivotal moment, that box coming into my hands.
I started writing code, and all I was interested in was graphics. So I started writing code that drew graphics probably in 1982, I was 12. So I was interested in getting the computer my Apple IIe to make pictures. And so that's where it started. And it was just a slow progression from there to here. Go ahead, David.
It was either the Commodore 64 I got for Christmas or the summer of '92 building IBM PS2 Model 70s in a closet and imaging stacks of them. And that really turned the key for me.
Yeah, that's great. Ken?
Yeah, it was my first, I applied for the job at Arthur Andersen doing graphic design. At that time, it was all on drawing boards, rotary pens. And while waiting for the interview, I was having a chat with a guy in the computer room with all these PCs. And I chatted with him for a good half an hour before my interview. And I didn't actually get the graphic design job. I got the job doing the computer graphics. They sent me a letter saying, do I want this job? Because the guy was leaving in 2 weeks and I had to learn doing computer graphics on a PC, which was a CGA, 4 colors from a palette of 8, as you know, 4 colors, those 4 colors are those 4 colors. And yeah, I've been doing that ever since.
That's great. Great, Chris.
In the early 70s, when I was 12 years old, my brother had a band that practiced in the basement of our house. And I remember I'd sit in the corner of the basement listening to everything. And I thought, if only there was a way I could adjust the volume of everything independently, I could make this sound better.
That's where it began.
And it took a few years before I found out what an audio mixer was. But a teacher, a great teacher in high school, pushed me to help her make like end of the year slideshows. She saw something, and Joan McGrady Beach, I got the privilege of meeting up with her a few years ago, and I walked her through Slice, and I said, yeah, thank you. You're the cause of all this. It was a wonderful moment.
That's great. Next question.
Moving on, the next one comes from Rupert McRae from Dallas, Texas, and he says, what are the panel's favorite or most used Pelican case models, and any comments on the different Pelican product lines like the Air?
Go ahead, Carl.
So most used would be the one that fits the SD cards. It's yellow and it floats. So it's a thing I can see floating down the river if I can drop it in the river. That's the most important thing. My favorite one's going to be the 1770. That can fit a 88 key piano.
I think the ones that I've owned the most of are probably 1650s. 1650s are kind of a solid, large size. They're relatively easy to get through things. We started with 1640s, but the 1640s are really large and hard to put in cars. So we moved more to standardization. I have to blame Brent Schnarr for it. He gave me a hard time about the 1640s. He was just like, oh, these are too big. And I put it off for a while, and then we started buying 1650s and probably owned 50 or 60 of them at one point. They stack well. And then of course there's the 1510, which you use for flights. So the 1510 is kind of it's a carry-on. It's 22 by 14 by 9, which is the US carry-on size. Doesn't quite work in Europe because it's 2 inches shorter, but you can get away with it. And so those are probably the two that I use the most, and I have I've stacked them up, and we have definitely other ones, but those are the big ones for us. You were going to say, Jeffrey?
Yeah, those were the two I was going to say. I have a third one. I think it's the 1610, but it's out because that's holding my my at-home kit, and it's out to a client right now. So other than that, I have one more case, but it's actually not a Pelican case. It's more of a DJ style case because I can put a laptop on top, lift up the lid, and then have it's a 2U rack mount inside, and that works really well. I think that's an SKB one.
Bill?
Since he asked specifically about the Airs are lighter weight. They don't offer as much protection, but I remember the days when I had lots of big Pelican traveling cases and found out the airlines had installed the 50-pound weight limit, and like the case was 40 or 32 pounds without anything in it, and it became pretty unusable. So that's the trade-off: lighter weight or more protection. And most of the stuff that we all carry around, more protection is more important.
Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. Again, we often talked about VESA mounts for monitors, but in fact, VESA has much wider context. It refers to Video Electronic Standards Association. Where else do VESA standards touch the world of production?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So they touch a lot in racks as well. So it's not just the mounts, they actually have racks as well. I think the 19-inch has also got a VESA stamp on it as well, but a lot of other standards are around that. And I've also seen it in cables. So actual cables and the quality of those cables or design of those cables, essentially the wire gauge of those cables. I've also seen those have a VESA stamp on them as well.
I have to admit that I've never thought of anything other than the VESA mount. So that's like an IEC. When you say IEC cable, I have a pet peeve when people say IEC cables that I usually go at them because I'm like, it's a C13 or it's a C, or it's a C15 or it's a NEMA 15 or whatever it is, because otherwise we end up with the wrong cables. So anyway, so the VESA, now I realize that I don't know what the rest of the VESA is. All right, next question.
Moving on, Rupert McRae again from Dallas, Texas. This time, Zoom events went live into general availability this morning. Will anyone be testing this out? One interesting feature is multi-session events, where you can use either a webinar or a meeting or both.
Has anyone played with it at all? Grant?
No,
There was short pass to him.
yeah, nice. I haven't played with it yet, but I haven't been super worried about it, only because we've built a platform around
Right.
this type of thing. But they aren't doing anything that is joining multiple meetings together, and so it is just, if you want more than 1,000 people, then you just have to go to webinar. That's their only option. So I mean, you can go to 50,000 people in one webinar, which is, that's impressive. But
Grant's like, that's cute.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
what I was gonna
50,000,
say. We can do more than that in meetings. But yeah, so it will be interesting. But they really have a naming convention problem, Zoom, because if you go to zoom.us/events now, that's their own events, and so like the Zoom events, and it was the same thing with they had Zaps, which clearly that fell apart because of
Zapier
problems with Zapier. And so then they call it Zoom Apps, and same thing. And I think Zoom Apps has just launched as well. And so I was just trying to play around with that, but the problem is you got to restart Zoom, and I happen to be in a Zoom meeting at the moment. I can't restart Zoom.
Yeah, it's I'm looking forward to playing with it and seeing what it looks like. But I think that a lot of us cobble together so many things that it's hard to know whether it would make a significant difference for us. Chris, did you have something? No. Next question.
Comes from Stan Chan, a longtime participant here on Office Hours from Roseville, California. What is the best way to currently share a keynote presentation on Zoom?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
Well, I currently do it via an iOS device in 1080 into. So that's for slides. I have also put a slideshow into Office Hours via the same approach. I'm pretty sure that if you do the screen share with high quality, that'll also work.
Yeah, the two things. One is using the iPad. I use the iPad into my ATEM Extreme with an HDMI input. But the other way to do it is when you do screen share, make sure that in Keynote you set it to share to a window as opposed to just starting the keynote. That way you can share just that window, and you can even set that window to full screen, but what it means is it doesn't take over your control screen. So you can have a second window, share a window, then go into that and hit full screen, and it will take up that full screen that you have there, but your main window that you're in Zoom is still opened. And so that's the easiest way to make that work. Go ahead, Chris.
Another super handy feature with Keynote is using Keynote Live, where you could have a remote person with their laptop running their slides in their living room or their home office or their stage, and the computer that's actually being cut into the stream is local to the switching system.
Yep.
And they can run it, they can edit it, they can do whatever they want, but your computer stays full screen.
And we've done some events that way with Chris Summers when he was doing some of his camera breakdowns last year. It works perfectly.
It's amazing.
It's
very cool.
He's able to advance his slides, and they just change on my end, and it's caching those files. So sometimes you want to jump into that live and sit for a minute because it's actually pulling all those files down so that it can play them out smoothly. And so it's not just sharing the screen over the internet. Go ahead, Grant.
The most helpful feature that I found is in the preferences and then slideshow, and there's a checkbox to allow app switching while presenting. And so if you weren't going to do the window thing that Alex was talking about, and you're doing full screen, the default is that you go full screen and now you can't go back to Zoom to do the screen share. But if you enable that little checkbox, now you can start your presentation and then go to Zoom and then screen share. And it's the most amateur thing I feel like, and maybe it's from conferences when you are showing your desktop and then you see someone go into Keynote and then they press play. You don't want to have that. And so that's just a way of avoiding that.
That's great. Next question.
Comes from Nick Batt, who was here as our special guest a week or so ago. Aside from the 1080, can you explain the Zoom setup for the current version of the show?
Yeah, so it's set up for 1080. Trying to think of anything that makes it special. that is, it's a webinar, obviously. I have, one of the things that I do is I use the Zoom announcement that just tells you that the show is coming up as a way to send out a newsletter. So basically I, put in, I thought that you couldn't do anything with that. And then I realized, you can put a bunch of notes down below. So now there's a page of data that goes down below that just tells you what's happening this week, and gives people links and so on and so forth. I'm trying to think of anything else that's special. Go ahead, Carl.
So something Nick might be interested in, we do duplex audio. So people must have in-ears or overheads, so they don't want it coming out of speakers. So no audio coming out of speakers from the Zoom webinar that goes into our microphones. So that's really important, that all participants have either in-ears or headphones and a microphone of some sort.
As best we can. We definitely.
As best we can, but especially if it's a panelist that knows they're coming and they've got like a week's notice, then hopefully they can have themselves sorted out.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
Just also to make the point that I believe registration is obviously required, but also when you join, you'll need to be on a authenticated Zoom account to join.
Yeah, and so what that does is that by having registration required and authenticated, it means it's just a lot harder for people to Zoom bomb us, which we had a little in the early days. So it just puts up a little bit of a gate there to stop that. So that, and because if we block someone from there, it makes it a little easier. I do have enable HD for screen shared video, enable HD for attendees. I request permission to unmute people so that if they're stuck with, we don't usually have to worry about that, but we want to be able to do it if we wanted to. I also force, force upgrade a lot. I'm not doing it quite as fast as I did the last one because it caused a bunch of trouble here. But generally I kind of force everybody to stay relatively current with Zoom. That way we know what features are available across the entire group. And because we're not doing only one event, like we're not doing an event, we're doing an event every day. We can push a little harder and be a lot more experimental in that process. Go ahead, Bill.
I just also wanted to point out that Alex is, from the very beginning, pushed toward visual quality in the panelists themselves. I mean, I'm looking at the gallery now and I'm noticing that everybody's face stands out. It's not, in 99% of the Zoom meetings I go into, there's 5 or 6%, sometimes 25% of the people who are shadowy. You can't see them. You don't get any connection with them because you can't actually see their face on the Zoom. The fact that we have taken the opposite attack and care about the quality of the image really, I do think makes a huge qualitative difference in this.
And I think it's beyond quality. I think that bad audio and bad video increase cognitive load. So on the person watching, it's when we think of Zoom fatigue, you're filtering out things that aren't working. Like when you're talking, when there's a lot of traffic, when there's a lot of noise in the background for a conference call, when someone's in a bad conference room, which is like almost all the time. When all of those things are things that it's why you get tired when you're doing those. When the audio is really good and the video is really good, you can do this for a long time because you're not adding as much cognitive load during the show. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I was just going to add, as far as setup goes and kind of the way that we do it, we learned the hard way about having multiple co-hosts, and then found that once they changed their from gallery to speaker view, that changed it for everyone as attendees. And so we've tightened up on that. Now we've just have it that the host does it and we don't have a bunch of co-hosts. So it's a little tweak that we learned. But this focus mode, I don't know if they're going to add that into webinar, but I don't know if it's something that we really want, but it seems that it means that the host can see the gallery and nobody else can. All of the attendees can only see, the active speaker. But
what's it's too late for us. So as Andy Carluccio's here, and we're going to be working. We had dinner last night. We're going to be working on it today, but we're building the big, Zoom hardware solution right now with Zoom ISO and Zoom OSC. Most likely, what's going to happen is that we will be slowly moving between now and the end of August away from webinar altogether. And so it'll just be, you'll just watch a stream and you'll be in Mukana or watching the stream and watching it there, because we're going to be adding graphics and 3D, animation and all the other things that, there's not going to be a show in Zoom. Zoom's going to be the thing that holds the panelists that talk. And then everything else will be, external to that. So I'm not that worried about the features. In fact, the biggest problem I have is I don't know how well I'll know Zoom as we go down the path, because we won't be really using it the way it was designed. We're just using it to pull ISOs. So that's kind of the direction that we're we're slowly moving, and we've been moving that way for a little while, and with stops and starts. But now that we have all the hardware in place, I think that you'll see us experiment. We'll have more experimental days in August where we just kind of fiddle with this and try to figure it out. Our goal is to be running UHD, HDR with binaural audio minimum by September. So that's kind of the trajectory that we're on to make that work. In fact, we're going to be planning to eventually use. There's a couple of limitations right now, but eventually use the Elemental Link as our encoder. So we're gonna work on that. Next question.
David Brady in New York up next, and he says, do HDMI dummy plugs present themselves to the OS as a physical display such that I can put Windows on that display and access them via a VNC?
Go ahead, Rupert.
That is exactly how they work. And you can use VNC, or I've also used TeamViewer. If you're going to use TeamViewer, it's important to remember you can use TeamViewer in LAN only mode if you really need to. But also try and learn the keyboard shortcuts in your operating system for moving windows manually between screens in case you don't have access to your network and you get some application that's stuck on a screen that you can't see. You'll want to get those keyboard shortcuts to drag it over to where you can see it.
What are those keyboard shortcuts? I didn't even know there were Keynote. Sure.
On PC, you right click on the taskbar and then with like Shift or Alt or something, and then choose Move, and you can drag it over. It's something like that.
I see something to gather windows, so, but usually that gathers the display windows. But anyway, next question.
Jamie E. in Alpharetta, Georgia says, looking for hard drive recommendations for Final Cut Pro 10, basically. Open to anything that works fast and reliable. Synology, OWC, Promise, what?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So Final Cut is a little bit of an odd beast in that its code is extraordinarily efficient running on the Mac platform. They really tweaked it down, which to me, part of the surprise of that has been I don't have to be as fiddly. Now, I do use an OWC RAID 0 because I back it up constantly. And it has fast IO, but when I have to go on the road and use my laptop with even a portable bus-powered drive, I get very few frames dropped and very few problems in working normally. Now, bets are off if you're using uncompressed and you want to do 20 things, then you do need monster fast IO machines. But for basic video editing, I have been astonished at what I can get away with and get decent performance using Final Cut.
Go ahead, Carl.
So in otherworld computing, probably NVMe RAIDs, they do into their Helios systems. So you can get these caddies that go in. There's four NVMEs into one RAID. So you can get 8 technically in the Helios 3, which is the cheapest one. Promise is good, but you're getting kind of mega expensive for large 3.5 drives. So which is kind of the past.
I have to say that we got the NVMe drive. It's life-changing. That's the only, I won't go back like to other drives. Now that's for the work drive, and you can make those work drives depending on how much money you spend on it. You can make those work drives, pretty big, or it depends on how 2 terabytes or 4 terabytes or 8 terabytes, 16 terabytes. They get pretty expensive, but that big, large of an NVMe, they are so fast, and there's no sound, super fast, and very stable. And so we're kind of moving towards, those are like the work drive, and then we're backing up to a larger RAID or whatever. But when you're talking about, since you didn't say how much space you needed or how much you wanted to spend, if I was working off of something and I have it connected to a computer that can handle Thunderbolt, that's the drive to use, in my opinion. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I was just going to add, for more budget conscious, I'm using the T5s for projects all the time now, because they're so convenient, and I'll just store the whole Final Cut library on it for a whole event. I can open it up and do all the edits real quickly and pump them out. I'm only doing 1080, and so they work completely fine. I can just keep copying them really quickly. They're fast.
They're great. The T5s are great. If you have to write more than 400 gigs, they crush down to nothing. Both the T5s and T7s have a caching system, and when they hit 400 gigs to 450 gigs, they will go from really fast to like 30 megs a second. It just drops down. It's like a heat issue, or it's something. So if you have a continuous write of a large file, and I had some of those, or if you're copying them over, you'll see, this is only going to take a couple minutes, and then it's going to take 45, because it slows down a lot. And I've tried to cool them down and aerate them and everything else. I can't quite figure out I don't know what it is that happens, but both the T7 and the T5 fall apart at 400 megs, but 400 gigs, but that's a edge case. Go ahead, Beiju.
So yeah, so all of these options are great. Like if you're just a single editor working on a project solo, what would you suggest? Like if someone had to really work on it as a group or share projects, like the Jellyfish seems to be one of the popular options. Any other recommendations you would have on that scope?
All the larger systems that I've worked on for events, like when we need to put it in there, has been Jellyfish. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think the guys at Jellyfish, they at LumaForge cracked the code in terms of how to do network writing and reading. I know they developed a lot of that when they were working with, I think, the Swiss Broadcasting Corporation in a big bid thing, and they managed some special sauce. I do think those techniques are a little more widely known out there. So I think some more of the network providers have gone there, but OWC bought LumaForge and Jellyfish's technology, so that's where it headed eventually. They're just really rock solid
as a turnkey solution to just have everybody sharing files and a lot of multi-tenancy. It works really, really well. Yep, next question.
Moving on to Ray Collins in Kansas City. Well, that's weird. It won't go. There we go. While we're building, what are some good tips for building a productive desk?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So I like to go with something rock solid. So you kind of try and avoid any wobble or wiggle or something like that. Try and avoid any classical pieces of furniture because you're going to end up drilling holes through it to mount something later. I like to have plenty of power. So I like try and get the 4 or the 5 foot power strips, a couple of them, mount them. So I've got plenty of power, and then try and get some cable management under your desk. I like the kind of cable tray, raceways, things like that. And if you have the space, try and keep your desk away from the wall. That'll give you 100% access to the back of it to rewire and move stuff around. If you're up against a wall, you're going to have some headaches.
I can always tell someone who loads in, whether they do this a lot or do it or not do it very much, is whether they have about a meter gap between the back of their table and the wall. And when we lay it out, when we send out our layouts to people, when we used to load in back on physical events, there'd be where our table was, we'd always have enough space for basically a meter all the way around that we'd be able to, because we would put we need this much space, because we'd pull our tables in and make sure that we could walk around to the back. Because man, it really is another one of those things that just is the key to the operation. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I'm going to talk about in studio, because it sounds like that what you were talking about was something portable. But anyway, with in studio, what I have is a stand desk that's actually on wheels, because everything in my studio has wheels. If I need to move it out of the way for another set, then I can do that.
Mm-hmm. Motorized tables are really useful. Being able to motorize them up and down to get, to figure out where, exactly what height you need for that shot. You don't change them that often, oftentimes, but being able to change them is really nice. And they're not super expensive to have them motorized. I'm getting ready to build a new one. My tendency is to have a portable table. I have a folding 6-foot table that I'm using right now, and I slowly figure out where I want everything, and then I build it. like this is like I kind of have everything kind of where I want it, and then I'm going to kind of hack it into a place that I like it. Because the problem you get into is you don't want to pour concrete until you have the form that you want. So so building something out against that is a little bit more complicated. The one that I'm going to build is probably going to be an 80/20. 80/20's back end. So because it just means that everything about it is modular. I can attach things to anything there. Go ahead, Bill.
In terms of, he says specifically building, and I'm going to get there in a second, but look at the commercial furniture. Not that you're going to buy it, but look at all the little tiny things. We're talking about cable raceways, and whether you're on a single level or you have a bridge to put monitors on, all the things that professional equipment have developed over the course of the years is your school. So if you look at all the commercial stuff, then when you go to build things, steal ideas from them and put it together exactly to your specs.
Go ahead, David.
One other thing for small Manhattan living, mobility and flexibility are big. Quick Lock makes a couple of different laptop stands that are collapsible and really handy to have.
Good, Carl.
So I would start with something like this. You don't have to get this exact one, but this has what I'm more showing you here is a 19-inch that's in there in between where your monitors will go, be it speaker monitors or your display monitors, and where your main surface is. So you've got an air gap there, which people usually fill up with stuff that they don't need, coffee cups. If you put in 19-inch rails, or you can buy something like this, or you can make it yourself, then you can actually put in power supplies, you can put in routers, you can put in all the stuff you need that comes in a rack mount, or you can rack mount things that aren't rack mounted. So there are ways to do that as well. And it just gets it stops you having it either in another room or, to the side, and it's right at your fingertips as well.
And I'll try to find the link for it. We use, when it comes to really being productive, we have a company called Cabinet Works out of Cincinnati, Ohio, that I sit down with Brian at Cabinet Works and I say, I want turrets here and I want this long and I want this to be here and whatever. And he runs it out in a CAD drawing almost as fast as I can talk, and lays it all out and everything else. And then someone shows up and they build it. and it's exactly what I want. Now it's more expensive. I mean, usually $6,000 to $10,000 to do that. But if you're looking at, when you're talking about professional, like this is what I want for a broadcast unit, they're built, and designed and with everything that you need. Go ahead, Grant.
I would consider trying to get rid of fans on your desk. And so that's something that I've done is I've got my 16-inch MacBook is outside of the room, and then I've brought all the cables through and I've got rid of fan noise, and that's great for these types of calls. It's also just great for sound in your room. I've just got a nice really quiet room that I work in all day. All my fans are outside, so you consider that with all your cables and things.
Next question.
This one's a little odd. It comes from Tobias Moss, and I'm probably just not processing it well. What would it take to incorporate office hours panelists if they were living on the moon or on Mars? Incorporate confuses me.
Yeah. So go ahead, Ken.
Well, first I need to come up with a domain name of a solar system, because global won't work for our Mars and our moon-based people.
.Mars. Why don't we have we need, how is that even not something
not
like this
.Mars?
There
you go.
We need that suffix. Go ahead, David.
Good lighting and good audio.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Carl.
So the backbone would be the Deep Space Network. So this is a live view of the Deep Space Network right now. So it uses 3 different stations around the world, so they can see anywhere at all times.
I think the big challenge is latency. It'd be hard for them to keep
22
up with
minutes
the conversation.
from Mars. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like it would, to go to the moon. What's the latency of the moon? I don't know exactly.
3 seconds.
3 seconds. Is that 3 seconds each way? So it's they'd be a little out of the loop. We'd have to kind of wait for them. We'd be like, Grant, and you get that long, like, like just like, okay, we're waiting for you. We're waiting. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. and I hear, and Mars, of course, would be much worse. There's a couple minutes there that you'd have to wait for the stuff. And evidently the bandwidth in Mars is not broadband. That's what I've heard, is that the bandwidth is a little slower to get data. So we probably have
shipping lots of cable reels.
Yeah. I don't even know if we can carry audio yet. So
it's light.
But maybe in our lifetime we'll go back to this conversation and we'll be like, remember when we said it was going to be impossible? Now it's possible. All right, next question.
Ari Balak in Tel Aviv, Israel is up next. Do you use a RAID storage unit in your studio? And if so, which one and why did you select it over the other options?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So for photo backup, now it's only for backup. I don't use it as a server, so I'm not pulling any data off this. It's a Jobo 5C. It's one direction only. So once I've finished, as you say, work off my work drive, once I've finished with the client, I've delivered the photos, their photos will go onto this Drobo and they'll just sit, that's it. They also go on to just a Western Digital MyBook. So a cheap Western Digital. So that's the 2 backups. So I don't consider the Drobo 2. Drobo's 1. Western Digital MyBook is the other one. And actually the Western Digital MyBook is the one I'll access if I need to access the file. The Drobo, so I've found out that if you just use a Drobo as a server, they fail. If you just use a Drobo as archive and never touch them, they last forever.
I have a Pegasus that I back up to. There you go. That's a G-Tech. Hey, go ahead, guy.
Yeah. Here's let me see if I can lift this thing up. It's heavy. This is a 8-bay G-Tech G Studio. It's got 8 bays. You can do whatever RAID you want. I have it in RAID 5, I believe, right now. The nice thing is that if one fails, you just pull it out, and I have hot spares of these ready to go, and they have failed on me before. So, and I've been able to rebuild them. So it's super loud. I don't have this one plugged in right now. Like you guys have been working off for small projects. It's been working off the the NVMe drives or SSD drives, because this thing, it's almost uncomfortably loud, especially after listening to just the Mac Mini that it's hooked up to.
Guy, how long are your arms? Like, what is it that you can just pull all these things? You seem to have all these things that are
everywhere,
accessible, right?
They're all laying around.
Go gadget arms.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, Doug.
I have 6 different RAIDs connected to my system, different brands, different types. Most of them are 8 bays. RAID 6 is good because you can lose 2 drives, which did happen last week. But RAID 0 is actually in my computer, and I use that as a caching drive for Premiere. So when I'm doing editing, my RAID 0, which is 2 drives, 2 SSD drives in a RAID 0, super fast for caching. So it all depends on your use case and what you're using to storage, or actually I work off our 45 drives. That's the main drive right now. So get excellent speeds.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Just something which I always keep in mind whenever you're talking about any kind of system which you're building in redundancy to, whether it's RAID or power supplies. If you are relying on that redundancy, you have to monitor it, because you don't want to discover that you have a drive failure and then you just find out that you had another drive failure 3 weeks before and now you're completely down. You've got to monitor these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Craig Gibson of Washington, D.C. is up next. Zoom apps appeared in my Zoom client for the first time this morning. Does anyone have experience with them, and are there any of note to consider?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So this Zoom apps is a sort of expansion of the Zoom marketplace, which has been around for a while. They've just brought it closer to the client and allow you to integrate it a bit more sort of seamlessly. A lot of these apps do some relatively simple things that integrate Zoom into other applications like your CRM platform or your billing platform or something else. But there are some ones out there that give you like universal API integration. So you can integrate with the Zoom API and trigger actions in other systems through other APIs to do other stuff. So from an integration point of view, it could be quite flexible.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, so this, as I was saying about it before, where they launched it as Zaps and it changed, and they announced it in September, right? And it's just turning on today, so they have major problems with it. And one of the apps that they promoted heavily was Slido, right? And so then Cisco bought Slido, and now it disappeared from the
Is
Zoom
it true?
apps.
I keep on meaning to ask you, is it true that Slido took chat out? Did they remove chat from Slido?
Yeah, there's no chat. I don't know if it was removed. I didn't know that it was there before. They have a thing called ideas, and so they kind of got this, a couple of different ways of taking questions and then posting ideas. So they've got a few different things there. But as far as events go in Zoom, there seems to be a couple of things. I think Kahoot is another one that's kind of like that event-based interaction. And so think of Zoom apps as just like the participants pane that you can bring up. It'll be an app that'll sit in that, which I'm very excited about. I mean, Meccana would be awesome, just sitting right in Zoom in a window that you can sort of move around, or it locks to the side. Yep. And we want to do a similar thing with our dashboard in Obvio, so that you can have some of that interaction, some forms and some things like that are tied back to an event. So we're quite excited about it, but it's just been a really weird release.
Yeah. Next question.
Jeff Francis, Columbia, South Carolina. Is a week-long 24/7 live stream possible on YouTube? Any helpful hints or caveats if he wants to try that?
Go ahead, Carl.
So yes, it is. So NASA Spaceflight, which is an independent website, has a live stream that goes 24/7 from Starbase down in South Texas. NASA itself has NASA TV and NASA TV Education. They have a few different NASA TVs that are 24/7. They may have special hook-ins because NASA is friends with the owners of Google, so they may, because they've been there for a very long time doing 24/7 live streaming. But NASA Spaceflight is they're independent, so they're paying for it themselves. They're streaming from robotic cameras in the middle of nowhere, 24/7 from multiple cameras.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So yeah, I have a 24/7 channel that's running right now. I have a machine down in my basement, Windows based, but you can also do Mac. It is running Wirecast. Out of the three, I found that Wirecast was the most stable for longer streaming. The bigger thing is that I can also set it up to go to Restream, which will then go to Twitch and YouTube. Now, if you're going to do it, I would highly suggest to not create an event, but to create the live stream. Let it do just do the stream now option, and then let it go. That way, if it dies, you can start it back up again. And there are embed codes that you can create and put on websites that once it goes down, they just refresh the page and it's back up whatever new container is.
And Jeffrey, it sounds like your audio is doing an aggressive gate. It just seems like you're dropping out every once in a while. Go ahead, Guy.
I might have been, I might have moved away. Okay.
Yeah, we've done a 24-hour charity live stream 7 years in a row called December, and one of the things that we learned was to use a hardware encoder. The software ones would drift over the 24 hours, so be careful of drift. You want to run some tests. The other thing is your record will only be in the last 8 hours. YouTube will not store the entire 24 hours. The other one is you have a second encoder, hardware encoder. There's a primary stream and a secondary stream. We've had hardware encoders go out during this 24-hour, and this was like YouTube celebrities flying in, so it couldn't go down type of thing. So we would use like an AJ, Hilo, and a Teradek encoder, and have backups, and then power backups. That was the other thing that went out during this event. Somebody plugged in a GH5 charger, and it took out the whole power grid. So be careful.
Lo-fi hip hop radio has been running 24/7 since February 22nd, 2020. And right now it has 31,000 viewers. Like a lot of us listen to it while we're working. Like especially if you're trying to test something, or you just want to put something as an embed code, that becomes the thing that we use. And so, yeah, you can do it for a long time. Next question.
Jeremy Bullen in Portland, Oregon is up next. Best 24-inch prompter for my wife's Zoom studio. She's teaching a class and wants to be able to look directly into her camera.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so I reached out to Guy Cochran, and he hooked me up with this Prompter People's ProLine Plus. It has one SDI port if you have the high bright option, and 2 HDMI, and it works great. Even with my old eyes, I can read the text on Bacana and look into the camera. It's great.
It is. That's what we've used. I don't know how many I've owned at one point, but they're really great. I mean, for the 24-inch, they're probably the best ones. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather, often panelist, Melbourne, Australia. Recommendations for pan, tilt, zoom joystick controls to work with IP cameras and vMix.
Go ahead, Carl.
Data Video make one that works with multiple standards like Panasonic and Sony's. So Data Video.
Go ahead, Grant.
The Xbox controller works awesome with vMix.
Nice. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, this Scarhoy one I'm digging in the other day, Alex, you had asked about the ability to change the control on the speed, which is all these buttons are programmable. So I have it hooked up right now to a Burn Dog, but one of the ones, I'm still learning this thing, but you can see this is one of the smaller ones, and the buttons change as you type here. So right now I have it on speed control 100%, which is very fast. Like this moves around almost too quick. And then I can drop it down to 13, which this is now 13. So I can do these really small, subtle moves.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, the PTZ Optics also has the ability to hook up an Xbox controller if you want to go outside of vMix.
Yeah, and you're still coming in and out, Jeffrey. The Scarhoy, I think, is really producing great hardware right now, and they're just getting really good. And because they're an external controller, that they're just going to everything, and they're really working out all the details to work with all these different cameras. Next question
comes to us from Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia. Preferred HDMI matrix switch.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I'll let Alex speak to this.
I still haven't turned it on. This week I'm finally through. My event was on Monday, so now I'm ramping up. This week is cleaning up, and then next week I can start like finishing the rebuild. But it's sitting right here. I have that. There's two of them. One is $9.99, and the other one is $7.49, and they look identical except for one doesn't have, I think, RS-232 or something, or 422, and so. But that's it. So I have the slightly less expensive one than this, but it looks like it's functionally the same for what I need. Go ahead, Beiju.
So I'm pulling an Alex today that because there's no price put there. You should look at Lightware. They make really the Rolls Royce of HDMI matrix switches for production. They're rock solid, pretty flexible and programmable, but they are pretty expensive.
And is it Lightware? Is it Lightware WAR?
WARE. I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay. Next question.
Robert Soji in Los Angeles, California is up next with, can the panelists recommend a rechargeable battery-powered source for remotely powering a low-power setup for a couple of hours? And it looks like DSLR actually says DSLM plus ATEM Mini Pro plus a small mixer.
Go ahead, Carl.
So the Interfit Nomad, I had it up before. I may bring up the slide if someone else wants to do it. But yeah, the Interfit Nomad, it's $350 US. It can handle 400 watts. It has interchangeable batteries, so you can have a second battery. The battery's
who
about
makes it again?
150. Interfit. It's a Californian company. Yep, and it's called Nomad. It's bright yellow, which is kind of good. But yeah, so it's only 100, it's only US voltage, so 110, 120 volts, so it won't work in Europe or Australia, unfortunately. But it is for the price. Like, there are items out there that, like, Godox has one that's twice the price, which is kind of interesting. Godox is generally cheaper, but this is the Godox one does do 240, by the way. But this is such a good product for, especially in North America, where 110 voltage, 120 voltage, and the fact you can change the batteries just quickly. So if one dies, you can switch it over. It has two outputs. So total draw will be 400 watts, and has one or two USBs as well. So you can charge off your phone. You don't have to use up an output just to charge your phone.
Looks incredible. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next with, what techniques have been helpful when you're producing music and feel like you just don't have any inspiration?
Carl.
Listen to music, so listen to other people's music, but also there's the chord progressions, 1 5 3, 1 5 6 4, those kind of things. Play around with those chord progressions. So go look up chord progressions online, and if you know your major and minor chords, just go play with those chord progressions, because 99% of songs in the charts are based on those chord progressions.
Jeffrey, real quick.
I'll get in the car and I'll try and figure out a song from there. That's my best way to do it.
Next question.
Moving on, David Brady in New York is up next, and David says, using Companion, I have multiple instances of connections for multiple target machines. Is there a hotkey method to enable or disable based on need in order to save resources?
Yeah, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I mean, the enable and disable on the instance obviously is there, but do you know what? Sometimes I'd ask the question about what resources are you seeing problems with the resources? Because I get into this trap of thinking that I need to save resources, but we've got these super powerful machines that are actually doing a very simple task, and that's what it's designed to do. Whenever there's something I have that's looping, I get worried that, it's looping over and over. But actually, it's just designed to do that, and it'll just do it for years. So unless you're seeing problems, I think it's fine. That's what it's designed to do.
Next question.
Moving on to Stuart Fairweather, Melbourne, Australia. Often on the panel, HDMI's provision for 3D interleaves, left or right video channel. Could this be co-opted to fill on left on key on right for chroma key?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
You need some pretty high-end solution, because I don't think the consumer ones can do it that easily. And because it is timed, they won't be timed exactly the same, because generally the way 3D will work with active shutters is it's left eye, right eye, left eye, right eye. So they're not timed the same. So that's going to be harder to do a linear key or a chroma key. The other thing is high-end solutions, which is the passive system you see in cinemas and some TVs, which use polarized glasses. They are shown exactly at the same time, but you will need to add in more equipment. It may just be cheaper to buy 2 hyperdecks.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back. What keyboard stands do you prefer for using in the studio? I'm looking at the K&M Spider Pro, and he has a link there.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
So these mono kind of style stands were very popular in the 90s. Starting to fade out now. I use a Z stand from Roland. So if you just go Roland monolith, the Z stand will be the first one that comes up. Looks like a letter Z. I also have to my right, which some people have seen, which is a 4-tier quick lock. It's actually a 3-tier plus 1 tier because you can buy an extra tier for it. So I've got a 4-tier quick lock. Quick lock is really good because the rosettes are very deep and they're not going to go anywhere. So I like quick lock as far as their rosettes. That's the main thing I look for is, will this rosette wear out over time? And they never will.
Next question.
Comes from Nick Batt, it looks like. And Nick says, let me get that clicked. What do you do to manage the Davinci Resolve cache disk filling up? There doesn't seem to be a way to auto-delete finished projects data.
I don't know if there's an auto-delete for it. I mean, I think I go through and clean it. I have to admit that I cache stuff to a drive, and I tend to flash the drive. Like it's the only thing on it, is caching, because caching for a lot of things is, you want to, I don't know exactly where on the interface you can define it, but you can define the cache drive, and I would put it somewhere where you can just get rid of it all. Caching is a thing that you don't want definitely on your home drive, because it will fill it up. So it's why, again, in Final Cut also, you want to make sure that you put your project folder, your event folder, somewhere other than your home drive, so that when it does its little rendering thing, it doesn't ruin your mail databases. Not that it's ever happened to me. Next question.
Jeremy Bowens back from Portland, Oregon. Favorite telestrator software and surface, and he notes Wacom or something like that.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I use my iPad with Keynote. I do have the Wacom Cintiq 16, and I have tried a number of the apps on the Mac for whiteboards and stuff, but I'm just waiting for Alex to release his software, and then I'll be sorted.
Mine is actually simpler than everybody else's. It's just that it's not. We just have to stabilize it. But but there's nothing else out there that I could find that didn't have buttons and didn't have other things, and so it's but it is. And I use the Cintiq right now, although I have a 1 as well, the Wacom 1, which I think is all you really need. So for what I do anyway, you don't need to have the Cintiq, which is twice as much. I think the Wacom 1 was simplified. The Wacom 1 also has better cabling than the Cintiq does. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next and says, I use either a DiGiGrid D or an SSL2 Plus as my audio interface. Could either of those drive professional level in-ear monitors that could pass the office hours panelist test?
I think either one would. I mean, almost anything will drive an in-ear monitor. I don't think that would be an issue. Next question.
Moving on, David Brady in New York is back with, is there an easy way to join VIP 323 systems into Zoom webinars?
SIP 323.
SIP 323, SIP 323 systems into Zoom webinars practice sessions without keying in a host code?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think these should behave in a similar way to a Zoom room. And one way you can do that is if I have Zoom open myself, logged in to the same account that the room is associated with, I can go to my participants list and then invite that room. I think that should act in the same way on those SIP systems.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, it's a little bit different with those because of the connector, but I'm not sure if because it's still a user. If you could register that user as a panelist, then they'll come straight into that practice instantly. But yeah, it is a little clunky, that whole connection.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, the thing I've seen is, yes, we can invite them as a panelist, 323, and/or Zoom rooms. Zoom rooms, I get the prompt with the session is being recorded, or you're coming in as a panelist, and there's no way to get to that without a mouse or keyboard in the system. And the 323 systems, there's nothing pretty much. You only have that host code, so I'm just curious if there's a string you could pass that through, but I guess not.
I think it is tones at that point, but yeah, I don't know what those tones would be.
And are you using a video connection that for that?
We have a Cisco infrastructure that's aging out, and now that people are returning to office, they want to use those rooms to join, but Zoom is the platform of choice, so it's causing a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, we in DC we got one of the Cisco has an STI interface and what we did is we would join to that. We'd have people join to that, and then we would tie a two-way connection to that. But that was an existing connection to our switcher, and then added a little bit of latency, not a lot, but it definitely just made it easier because what we did is we basically built a giant interconnect. So whether it was Polycom or Cisco or Zoom, Skype, whatever we wanted to, anybody on any input could be on any flavor. And then we just use hardware to match them all together, which is similar to what we have now.
I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
And the last regular one in the queue comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says the Bob Moog Foundation has Dr. Bob's SoundSchool. He has a link there that teaches in elementary schools with analog synthesizers. Wouldn't high-end hardware and little kids mean a high risk of damage?
Go ahead, Carl.
So this is really good to see. So this is actually, it's Bob Moog's daughter who runs the foundation, and she's actually taken the lead from Uli Behringer. So about 18 months ago, Uli Behringer said he'll donate 1,000. It actually went up to 1,500 synthesizers. Actually, it was a broad range. So this is many different musical instruments that Behringer make. They said they'll donate them. And then recently, in the last month, they're actually donated into Rwanda. So these are high school kids in Rwanda now receiving them, unboxing them. And here's their classroom having a lot of fun with analog synthesizers in Rwanda. So this is the first group to go out and to be unpacked, which is pretty cool.
We should get I know people in Rwanda with cameras, so we should do a little thing about that. That'd be really fun. Yeah, and I think that kids can be taught not to break things. They don't have to break them. You definitely this assumption that they can't do it, I think, is part of what builds them up towards not being able to do it. So I think that we, as a kid, I did things that not only you couldn't break, but could break you. So you grew up on a farm, you learn to be, you could learn to be aware. So I think that we just underestimate kids often. Next question.
We do have more. Good. Douglas Carmichael's up there, says, what sonic advantages are there to custom fit in-ear monitors versus generic in-ear monitors?
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
In-ear monitors generally aren't the best for sonic reproduction. So you actually want if you want to get best sound, over the ear cans would be the best.
I think it's comfort mostly, that's there. We're running out of time, so we're just going to jump to the next question.
Rupert McCrae, Dallas, Texas, says, when sharing a link to a YouTube live stream, is there a way to link to the start of the stream rather than just picking up at the current time? The normal link to timestamp URL TX does not seem to work in a live stream.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, there is. There's a bit of code. Best way of showing it, because if you look on the website, on our website, you'll see that when we talk about certain subjects, if you go to those videos, they go straight to.
But the question is, can you do that when it's live? Can you link to something to the beginning of the event while it's live? And I don't think that's possible.
I'll try.
It assumes that the behavior that you want is to be live, and then you have the DVR. You can go backwards. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, as Alex just said, it's only if they enable the DVR function. Some live streams are live. You can't even scroll back no matter what platform you're on. So that's up to the person who presses live. They can choose to say, don't be able to scroll back. So it's just live. So, but yes, when you start a live stream, it's going to put you into that first 2-second segment that's live. And then if it does have the DVR function, you can scroll back quickly, but some live streams don't.
But I don't think there's any way to link to a live event in the past, because those functionalities just aren't in that part of the platform, like when it's running. And one of the things you always have to look at with live is simplifying the pipeline, because one of the challenges is that you start adding, every button you add is a risk. So when to a live event, so everything that you add is another thing that could go wrong. And especially when you have, we talk oftentimes about multiplication of the viewers. If you have 100 people watching something and one person has a problem, you worry about it. And the reason you worry about it is because if you have 100,000 people, that's 1,000 people on Twitter complaining about your stream. So that's, so you have to pay attention to those little numbers. And because of that, you try to keep, the functionality as simple as you can, as possible. So, all right, we're going to change subjects into our second hour. And I think we have the folks from Elemental and AWS here. We're going to invite them to turn their cameras back on. Hey guys, hi Brian, Matt.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hope you enjoyed it. Hey, Joel. There we go. So Joel, Brian, and Matt. Do we say Elemental or AWS? How do we define
AWS Elemental.
AWS Elemental all together.
There you go.
Very good, very good. And I have the pleasure of hanging out with these guys pretty often, talking about what we're working on. So it's really, really great to have you guys here. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk about the new Elemental Link. I have one that they sent, that AWS Elemental sent out to test, and it's here. If you go to my YouTube page, you'll see a HDR3. I'm very scientific about, I've read all the things about YouTube about how to name your files so that more people watch them, and I've just decided that HDR3 will be fine. So there's a whole 12 people watching right now, but what you'll see there is that is an Blackmagic Ursa that is got a PQ LUT that is going out of there into the link. The link is then going to is streaming to AWS. AWS is then streaming HLS to YouTube, and then it shows up on YouTube. And so that's the pipeline. And one of the things that is revolutionary is I don't know of anything else that does it that easily. Like now, like when it took a little bit of, like me figuring out, I just not done HLS to YouTube before, and I had not done a bunch of other things. So there was like a little bit of back and forth figuring that out. But once it's done, now it's a box. It's a box that I can plug in. I could mail this to someone with a LUT, and just say, put this on your Blackmagic camera, plug this in, or put it on the output of your switcher, plug this in, and we're off to the races. I will say that the black levels are a little off because I haven't tried to shade the camera yet. So it's a little bit lighter than it needs to be. But we'll play with that. But it is in HDR. So that's the other thing to note is that that it is that looks really overexposed, Ken. I don't know. Oh, are you looking at it as in an SDR output, Ken? That might be
that's coming from my HDR monitor.
Does it look good on your side? Because it doesn't look good on our side.
No, it is very bright. it is still bright on my side.
Yeah, so that may be some stuff.
This is what I'm seeing, so it looks a lot different. Yeah.
One thing that we want to look at there is that the HDR is new for YouTube as well. So this is all one of the things we're really excited about is it's a brand new look, brand new thing to be able to do there. But the link, of course, came out about a year ago. And can you, Matt, can you tell us a little bit about the progression of how the link became what it is and how did we get to the UHD?
Yeah, exactly. So with Link, that's our little orange one. We basically sought out to solve the problem of, how do we make it just really easy for folks to get video into Media Live, where they just have an incredible transcoder in the cloud that can get it video into whatever format they need. Link UHD, we're basically taking those same ideas, but just adding a ton of performance, right? So we're going from 1080 to 4K. And then we're going from 8-bit to 10-bit, which is really the thing that I'm excited about. Like that's where visually you just notice how stunning it is. And then we're also going from 420 contribution to 422 contribution. You don't see that as clearly as like 10-bit or 4K. But basically, it's same idea as Link, just, really, really stunning video quality. I have one here. One thing that you don't really notice when you're looking at pictures online is like, this thing is just, actually, I still don't feel like I'm seeing it. It's tiny, like, you can fit 3 wide in a, 1 RU. It's a really small, low power device.
And if you have questions about the Media Live or the Link or AWS, definitely throw them into Meccano while we're talking. And, one of the things that, a lot of us were pushing on Elemental for a long time, looking for this little encoder. I think at the height, I think I owned maybe 20, 24, 26 Elementals. And they were all big, and shipping them was a thing. Like, packing them was a thing, shipping them, because you always take two, with primary and backup. So it was always like an 85-pound box with all the packing and everything else. Even the little O2Os were like this thing, and we took them all over the world. So they were all over the world, and I needed an encoding engineer at the location to run the Elemental. Now, in some cases, we could try to remote it through a VPN, and there was all this process and everything else, and that was always a complaint. So there was always this, every NAB, every IBC, every, I'd walk into the booth and go, when are we going to get something smaller? Like that we can just run from the cloud, and so that's why I've been so excited about the Link as it comes out, is that it finally gave us, like, we just had an event in Chicago where we just mailed them out, just mailed some links out. They get, we mailed 4 of them out. So we have two feeds with primary and backup. Plug them in, plug the output of the switchers in. They're managing all of that, and it just shows up inside of AWS. And then the big thing is being able to not only have the quality, but be able to configure it remotely. So all that configuration, you don't need any technical. The only thing you might need to do is have someone log in if you need a static. But if they go out as DHCP, generally they just plug in. And so, I mean, that's one of the things that we really, really enjoy about it. The other thing that is new, Matt, is it's 16 channels, right, for the SDI?
Yep, 16 channels of audio, right? So if you're passing just a ton of languages, doing some international sport or something like that, you can get a lot of audio through. We're, of course, also working to support various Dolby formats, and we'll get there soon.
Yeah, and that's the, I mean, one of the things that I'm excited about is I do a lot of Dolby stuff and or Dolby type encoding, and so having that, having those 16 channels is a big deal, because 8 was not enough to post what we were trying to post. Also, to Matt's point, I mean, one of the big things with encoding languages is being able to put 12 languages on or 14 languages on plus stereo, and have them all up there, because it's so much easier to deal with them once they're in the cloud than having lots of encoders putting out stereo tracks, or even with the Link. We have a partner in India that needs more than 8 channels for languages, and so that's kind of a constant problem for us. Is there anything else new about the UHD Link that's different from the original? I can tell you something new that I like a lot, which is it's got a screw-on power. It seems like a little thing. The original one turns, and I never felt safe. The screw-on power. I know that seems like a little thing to everyone, but when you're building kits and you're throwing them in, and having that setup is important. Let's jump in. As we've been talking, the questions have been stacking up. So let's go ahead and jump into the questions, Bill.
Sure. The first one comes from Beju Gadia here in the panel from AMD India, and he says, any plans for a companion decoder for the Elemental encoders as a remote receiver, so we can have hardware, both encoders and decoders, that can talk and be managed from the cloud?
So we can't really talk about, forward-looking projects and products. But we've made Link HD, we've made Link UHD. We're really excited about this family of products. So just watch us closely.
Next question.
And moving to Beju has a second question in here, and he says, when splitting the video into multiple separate streams with the same video but different audio channels from the source feed, can we adjust the sync between the video and audio for each of the streams independently?
Is there a way to adjust sync in Media Live?
No, the audio will be whatever we're getting in. That's how it's going to go out. We don't adjust sync.
I need to double check. This might have been something we added very recently, like in the last month. A small little like AV video audio adjustment to sync with video in some cases.
We'll take a look at that. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. Can the Elemental encoders connect to public streaming services like Twitch or YouTube or other CDNs, content distribution networks?
Yeah, definitely. We run all the feeds through Media Live. So once you're in Media Live, you're able to have multiple outputs. So whether that's your own website, YouTube, Twitch, you're able to stream out from that single incoming feed.
And to all of them at the same time.
All of them at the same time.
Yeah.
CloudFront, CDN, Akamai if you need to. Yep.
Yeah, and that's been, we've used the links heavily that way, where we're basically having the link, just send up the one signal into AWS, and then we're splitting it out to private networks, everything from Ustream to Twitch to all different outputs, including things like captions and so on and so forth, are all supported across that.
Right,
that
and all those
stream.
outputs can be different, which is nice. So you can have different, renditions, different bit rates for different platforms that have certain requirements. So
yeah, it isn't. Yeah, it's not just a rebuild. It's really each one of them is getting what they need. Next question. Can't hear you. Can't hear you, Bill.
I'm sorry. Rupert McRae from here in the panel says, is the Elemental lineup feeling any impact from the global chip shortage?
We've been fine. You just have to order very, very far in advance.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Comes once again from Beju Gadia and the panel here. Any way to add a fallover network connection on the encoder itself, say via USB Ethernet or Wi-Fi adapter, and the possibility of bonding connections if additional interfaces are supported?
So we really handle failover with 2 links. That's what we recommend. So ideally, you'll have them on 2 separate isolated networks. So you'd be contributing up to 2 different availability zones inside AWS, and that's our recommendation.
Go ahead, Beju.
Yeah, I agree. That's the ideal situation. But sometimes, as you know, when you're in the field, like if you have any failures, or if sometimes it's a budgetary constraint, or it's not a high priority event, so you can only justify getting one. Is there an option, or if it could be supported, it would be a nice option to maybe have. Again, this is just some of the things I can understand. You can't talk about future product releases. It's something that I just was curious about as well, whether you can add extra functionality to the USB port itself.
And the USB port right now is mostly just an update port. Is that correct? Or
it's
maintenance
port? Not functional for any reason.
Yep. It will charge your phone, and that's about it.
Will it? It'll charge your phone? Can you actually plug it in to charge? That's great.
It'll power like a Wi-Fi dongle too. Like if you're trying to get Wi-Fi to Ethernet, there's some kind of unique little things you can do there.
That's great.
That it just delivers a little bit of power.
Or a coffee warmer.
A coffee warmer. Does the link have a Wi-Fi connection? I've never tried to do that. Is it or is it just Ethernet?
It's just Ethernet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just when you brought up the Wi-Fi, I was like, oh, can you put a thing on? Yeah. And we've generally used external routers that have that failover feature outside of our encoders to kind of manage that failover. Question for you guys: I actually haven't asked this or tried to figure it out, but how does it sync up when you have a primary and a backup? Do they sync well as far as the failover goes? Is it frame for frame, or is it close to frame?
If you're passing the same time code so if you have like an SDI splitter, sending that in to both of the links, we're going to have seamless failover for you.
So it's basically it's basically like a seamless output locking, or it's using that time code to output.
It's using the time code. Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. On the larger elementals, it's more work. Next question.
Rupert McRae here in the panel wants to talk thermals. Should stacking elemental units be avoided to maintain airflow?
Yeah, I would not stack a bunch of the Link UHDs on top of each other. The HDs are our orange HD device, lower power. Those are probably fine. The UHDs, probably the densest and best cooling is to just line them all up vertically.
Yeah, and mine's been running since before 7, and it's pretty warm.
They do get warm. They're warm, but it's because they're silent. There's no
because
fans,
the body is a heat sink, right? I mean, that's why the fins are there. Is that or they do look cool too, but usually when I see fins, I assume you're using the body as a sink.
Matt just wanted fins. He just wanted them. Yeah.
Old Cadillac owner.
Yeah, exactly. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back in with, are AWS Elemental services included in the AWS free tier? I'd love to be able to learn AWS without the risk of a large bill.
No, we've looked at this a bunch of times. We do actually ship links right now with a $500 credit. that you can redeem if you go through some exact workflow. So there are some promos out there that we can help you with, though.
That's great.
And you know, we take every customer on a case-by-case basis. So if there's something that a customer wants to try out, they can always feel free to reach out to Joel or myself, and we can make sure that they can try that out without the risk of a bill.
You know, and I will say that I have, you know, I just have my credit card in there, and when you go over that, there's a little bit of a free buffer, and when you go over that, you get a little alarm, like you get a little email like, hey, you just spent some money, but not a lot of money. I mean, like, you know, when I left this on overnight by accident one time, and it while I was doing testing, I think it cost me like $12. So it's not a big bill. I just have to buy, I just no lattes that day. You know, so that was it. Next question.
Nick Batt is up next, and Nick says, how low latency can we get? It would be feasible. Would it be feasible to use for a live feed with return comms?
Right now, we're not low enough latency to do a, you know, back and forth conversation. You know, we probably get to about 5 seconds or 6 seconds end to end. You know, including the player latency and the transcode latency and the actual device's latency.
Yeah, and pretty much
with regard to the link, though. So
yeah, that's a link statement. Yeah, exactly.
We do have other hardware that can go much lower latency. Things like JPEG XS or CDI contribution over Direct Connect can get, you know, up and down under a second, sometimes only a few hundred milliseconds. So.
And you know, usually this is where I haven't been that excited about, you know, using kind of more traditional methods. You know, usually we're using some flavor of WebRTC to get down below that, you know, over a public internet, just because that's what it's built for, but it's not built for quality. so as we get down into those low latencies, we end up with areas where just a lot more dropouts, which we see here in Zoom all the time. It's a WebRTC solution. Next question.
Rupert McCrae is back with, what's the firmware update cadence and process on the Elemental lineup?
So for Elemental Link, we basically update the software automatically, just like, say, a Ring camera in your house. Like, you don't even really think about the software. So if it's plugged in and it's not streaming, it will just receive software updates whenever we push them out. When a product's new, that can be pretty frequent, you know, say once a month. But our, you know, Link HD device that's now been out for over a year, you know, it's slowed down significantly, where, you know, it's a software update every 2 months or 3 months or something like that.
That's great. And in the dashboard, you just see up to date, you know, like it's, you know, this is the, you know, when it checks in, and it's the real power of a server defined encoder, which is that it all that stuff, you know, it can be just constantly set up, because it's not going to YouTube or it's not going to Facebook directly. It can be set up to provide bits exactly the way the server needs at that day, you know, as opposed to whatever you set, you know, 2 years ago and haven't updated. not that that's happened.
Yeah, and we're always sending up thumbnails as well. So as soon as it's plugged in, you're getting a thumbnail preview all the time at no cost, just so you can kind of verify everything's up and running.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
From the Philippines says, can you discuss output locking and what its purposes and uses are?
So with output locking, it was built so that we could support UHD signals from multiple encoding devices, right? So Elemental live appliances, you'd be able to run one unit with your 4K output, and then the rest of your ABR ladder on the second output, on the second node, so that you could lock those two together and contribute up your full ABR stack. So that was kind of the purpose of it. But now we have, you know, within Media Live, you're able to run an HEVC ABR ladder all within the same service. So we're seeing less of that at the moment, but now that we've kind of built that into our cloud services.
Yeah, and for us, for years, we've just used it so that it's a nice, it's a frame for frame fallover. So when you have if you lose your primary encoder, the viewer should not see it at all. You know, when the output locking is set up correctly, which has usually been, again, on the appliances has gotten a lot better. we've had the opportunity to do it for a decade or 5 years at least, and was not always as smooth. And so so it's gotten the fact that the two links can just do it on their own is pretty cool. Next question.
Texas says, is there ever an advantage to route an Elemental over AWS Direct Connect?
Definitely. You get latency benefits, reliability benefits. When we're dealing with, large sporting events, things like that, those are always over Direct Connect right from the venue.
Can you explain for folks what Direct Connect is?
Yeah, so Direct Connect is basically, if you think of a private fiber circuit in the video world, this is basically a private circuit into AWS, into our region directly through, one of the main hubs, like One Wilshire down in Los Angeles or things like that, where you're able to do these kind of cross connects into AWS. And those will usually be 1 or 10 gig circuits. So when you're dealing with, contributing CDI uncompressed into the cloud, you can use those to get that very, very low latency contribution. And it's also great for, live appliances, links, anything like that are running over your network. You're able to configure right into Media Live.
And it wouldn't necessarily increase the quality dramatically from the link. It would just lower the latency because the link is already maxed out at a certain bit rate, right?
It's maxed out, but it does go very, very high. Our link will go up to, I believe, 50 megabit. And then the link UHD is even higher. So, for one single feed, that's quite high.
Oh, yeah.
The next step up is really going to JPEG XS or uncompressed from a live appliance.
Yeah. And Chris, you're cutting off just a little bit. You might want to give yourself a little more unmute before you just names. Yeah. Next question.
From Dallas, Texas says, do you see IPv6 as part of the future for Elemental?
So I keep hearing about IPv6 more and more as a request from some of our larger corporate customers. It's still not there yet. I think the standard was written like 25 years ago, and we're inching towards it. It's certainly in our future. The question is when.
Yeah. I think that's what everybody says. Next question.
Are you seeing adoption of CDI workflows with Elementals? And if so, can you explain how?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we developed CDI, it was really to allow for uncompressed workflows inside the cloud.
Can you explain CDI for folks?
Sure. Yeah. So
a lot of
it's basically it's cloud digital interface. So it is basically, if you think of like an SDI port into AWS, uncompressed video and audio into an EC2 server. So whatever you're running on an EC2 instance, you're going to be able to hand that video off. So anything with, color correction, anything with, switching, anything, graphic overlays, that whole workflow can then be done in the cloud at ultra low latency, subframe latency. So that's kind of the idea, is that you're able to do those, remote production in the cloud with uncompressed.
Right. Absolutely. Very cool. Next question.
From Seattle says, I left my Elemental Link with a workflow going for a week before noticing the bill was over $100. Is there an alert to set up, as I usually only check the EC2 instances left on?
Yeah, so you can definitely set up billing alerts inside our billing console inside AWS. So you can set those tiers however you see fit. So that could be $100, $1,000, and you're just getting an alert to your email or phone as soon as you cross that threshold, and those will be instantaneous. So easy way to set it up.
One thing to clarify here, just having your link connected to the internet, there's no cost associated with that. This is only when your Media Live channel is running that you incur some cost from AWS.
Next question.
Is from Stan Chan in Roseville, California. He says, with Elemental Media Tailor, can you use channel assembly with ad insertion to input personalization as an overlay to the video stream using your own recommender service? Any issues with latency?
I'm not sure I fully followed that one. But you can
Let's
definitely use channel assembly to build out a linear channel, insert ad markers. We can, you can run any type of server-side ad insertion ADS, like the ad decision server on the side. So media tailors is going to be looking out whatever that ADS that you put in to replace the ads. That's where we're going to be looking. So if you customize that, you're able to run your own promotions or things like that inside your feed. And let me know if I missed that question.
Next question.
And Clifton says, great having the team here with us today. Was an Elemental tested for zero gravity in preparation for space travel? Thank you.
Yeah, oh, can't hear you, Matt. Oh, there you go.
Not tested specifically for it. We've had some conversations in this space. Good internet connection is usually the challenge here.
yeah, it's a little bit. I mean, what's interesting is that the when you're connecting to the space station specifically, it's a really old-fashioned satellite connection. It's not even, there's not really the bandwidth there to do that. They just pull it down, and so it's actually we've had a bunch of connections with the space station, and you pull it down to Houston, and then Houston makes it available either by bouncing it back to another satellite or putting it over fiber to other cities. So
yeah, we did a lot of customization there when we sent a live appliance up to the ISS a couple of years ago.
And did it work well?
Yep, that was the first 4K from space. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Next question.
E. Kennedy says from Washington, D.C., are we able to generate a viewership report out of CloudFront after a stream? If so, what details are there to share with clients?
So we're not doing client-facing metrics. So if you wanted to do that, you could use some of our products to essentially pull back, buffering ratios, things like that. A lot of our customers had integrated solutions like Ubora from Nice People at Work or Conviva to get user data back. But from CloudFront, it's really just traffic out. It's not user specific unless you're taking logs with something like a Lambda at Edge or CloudFront functions on each individual request to get data from the users.
Next question.
Carmichael from doesn't say, what use cases would most benefit from motion graphics via AWS Elemental Media Live versus motion graphics created at the production site?
So can you explain a little bit about the motion graphics options in Media Live?
Yeah, so basically we are now allowing for HTML5 overlays. So that can be with any type of company that provides that solution. So something like Singular would be an option for that, where you can kind of create your own real-time overlays, and then you're using the scheduling feature inside Media Live to activate or deactivate the feature itself.
And what's the latency in that?
It's very quick, about a second to turn it on or off. So it is a best guess. We're not syncing to video or anything like that. But we've seen customers start to integrate with, like sports customers will have the scoreboard kind of coming in and updating that JSON that's being read by the HTML, and then updating their screen with that.
And in that update, is it the second latency to turn it on and then it's live, or is it's like a second latency all the time from like a scoreboard?
Yeah, so like when you hit the API, it's going to turn on in about a second. It'll stay on as long as you leave it on. You update your JSON, and that's kind of up to the HTML latency to update. We're still getting that in, overlaying it on the feed, and then you can use the scheduler to shut it off as well.
And the app the service that you were talking about, Singular, which is a HTML5 service for graphics.
Yep, and we have a few recommendations that we have on our site.
How does that tie in? How does the Singular tie into Media Live?
So basically, you're just putting a HTTP link inside Media Live, right? So you're looking for the HTML page of that HTML5 graphic overlay that's getting overlaid onto the video itself. So we're actually pulling that in and rendering it on top of the video. So it's really a simple integration because you're just looking for a website at the end of the day.
And how does it, and the HTML5 gives it the transparency as well?
Correct. Yep.
Wow, that's really cool. Next question
is from George Kennedy, also still in Washington, D.C. Can you give the audience a quick workflow from encoder to CloudFront? There's a lot of possible workflows.
Sure. So the easiest one is plug your link into the internet, plug it into the camera. You can work with Media Live. We have what's called a workflow wizard. That's a very simple way to configure your inputs, configure your outputs, and go to YouTube in about 2 minutes. So it's very easy to go from encoder to Media Live to essentially to CloudFront via one of our two packaging and origination services. So we have Media Store, Media Package. Then you could go to CloudFront, or you can go right from Media Live to YouTube. So it can be as simple as link to Media Live to YouTube.
Well, and what is the difference between the Cloud Store and Cloud Package?
So
Why
Media
would you use one or
Store,
the other? Or
yeah, Media
Store
Store is basically, if you want to get the lowest latency possible, you're going to be putting files to that service. It's basically like S3 with a caching layer on top. So you're getting ultra fast read and write from that. So you're getting benefits above S3 so that you could kind of write like fragmented MP4 and pull from it at the same time. So things that you can't do on S3. Media Package is really if you need DVR functionality, if you need DRM, if you need time delays, if you want to have multiple endpoints where you're saying, I'm pushing an HLS, but I want to take Dash out, or I need Microsoft Smooth streaming out. And you're able to do that all from the same HLS source. So it has a lot more features and a lot more capabilities, but it's a higher cost than Media Store. So depending on what your workflow is, if you don't need the features of Media Package, we recommend Media Store. But if you're doing those more advanced, automatic failover inside Media Package, we're able to take, two pipelines in 2 different availability zones, so that you're keeping that redundancy up inside Media Package all the way through, and we'll handle that failover for you as we push out.
And then from there you can publish to CloudFront.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say if you're doing this for the first time, try out our new workflow wizard. It orchestrates everything. It sets up all the right connections, say between a link to Media Live, to package, to CloudFront. It's really easy. And it's really easy to both like spool up those resources, but then start them, stop them, delete them. It simplifies everything, and it'll get you started. So then you can start modifying and getting it exactly the way you need it, after you've set it up one time.
That's great. Next question.
Bert from Dallas, he says, has Elemental been tested over 5G, and would there be a partnership with a particular 5G carrier?
AWS in general is doing a ton of work with 5G carriers. We haven't tested our Link device with 5G yet, but at the end of the day, it's just a really good internet connection. So there's nothing stopping it from working. We surely would love the high bandwidth in some unique locations that it'll offer.
Absolutely. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, are Elemental units dependent on AWS backend services, or can they output a direct RTMP feed?
So the Link is dependent on Media Live. Our Elemental Live appliances are not dependent on any cloud service. So if you have the Elemental Live, AWS Elemental Live, it's going to be able to go to any service directly from the on-prem location. But Link will need to go up through Media Live in order to go out to any destination.
And I have to say that after a year of having the Link and playing with it, that there are things that we need to do with the Live appliance. So we have some of those things. We're still using them for certain things, but for RTMP, like a straight RTMP stream, I don't want to go through. I don't want to figure it out. I don't want to go directly to it. I always want to go through to AWS. It's just way simpler for me because it just much more visible. Actually, we don't have to think about it as much, and we've actually found it to be much more stable. Because now once the Zixi gets you into the cloud, and you have a lot of confidence related to that, and now you're in the cloud, streaming to another another service, and it's a much more stable connection, especially where we do a lot of things where we have to stream a lot of outputs, so to a lot of different services, to a lot of, and sometimes lots of ladders, all those things, and being able to have a simple internet connection in, and then break all of that out means I don't need all that bandwidth, and I don't have all of it riding on that. I have, 2 little links that are just pushing the content. And again, the 16 channels for us has been, really made a big difference. Next question.
E. Kennedy from Washington, D.C. says, what's the SRT workflow from Link to connect to Media Live?
So right now, Link uses Zixi as its connection to Media Live. It's not something we really change. We just assure you that your packets are going to get there. And then from Media Live, Brian, maybe you can.
Yeah, so once you're in Media Live, you can go out to Media Connect if you need to get the SRT out. So that's Media Connect is really where we're handling SRT, we're handling RIST, we're handling most of Zixi, those type of protocols. So that's really what Media Connect is. It's based for video transport globally. So from Media Connect in one region to another, all that's on the AWS backbone. So that's really what we're trying to do with that service. So anything with SRT up and down would be from Media Connect.
Go ahead, Beju.
So just one quick clarification on. I think Media Live has added SRT in just now. I think that's a recent addition. Before it just you always used to use SRT, or sorry, you had to use Zixi or RTMP.
But not from the link. I think that was the question there. I think you can do so the SRT. I believe you can get to connect, but you can't. The link is always Zixi.
Right, and it's a different story with an Elemental Live appliance.
Next question.
And from Stan Chan in Roseville, he says, can you run an experiment pipeline for A/B testing in a Media Live workflow?
I mean, what type of experimental testing?
Right. Yeah. Ask let us know what you're trying to test there, Stan. Not I don't follow that one either. So let's but I know Stan's got I'm sure there's a good use case there. I just don't know what it is. So next question.
Nicholas Carmichael, he says, has there been a broader discussion within AWS to create learner accounts that would have hard limits that can't be exceeded as discussed here? And then there's a link there.
I'm not aware of that.
Are you able to set budgets where it'll just turn off when it hits a certain limit within? Because the theory is you don't want someone to accidentally be in the middle of an event and have it just turn off. Most of us would say, hey, I would have rather been charged. Most people who are using it would rather have been charged for.
Right. And all of our services start with quotas so that you can't have kind of runaway billing no matter what. We limit you to 5 channels, so you couldn't end up accidentally spinning up 1,000 channels or something like that if you're, new to the service. So we have all sorts of limits in place already, but I have not heard of a hard cutoff.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, most of the time when you're talking about learning these things, if you pay a little bit of attention to it, we're talking about, 80 cents a minute or $1.50 a minute or per hour. I mean, not per minute. 80. These are usually relatively small numbers if you're paying attention to what you're doing. That's what I think I was afraid when we first got the link that I was going to burn up. It's going to have big bills, but they're relatively manageable given how much I use it. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. He says there's a whole slew of other HDMI/SDI to IP converters out there. Does AWS service support these too, or only the AWS Elemental? What advantages does the Elemental have over U-Ray, AJA, Blackmagic Design, or other devices?
If you have your own device, whether it's like an Elemental Live appliance or a Teradek or, you name it, you can get that video into Media Connect and into Media Live, just like you would with any other service. Link is different, where we've made it easier, so you don't have to actually log into your local web browser that's on the device and do a bunch of configuration settings and make sure you're sending to the right IP address and you've set up allow listing and you're encrypting and your keys are all correct. Like we've taken all of that out. So you just plug it in and it's now an input into Media Live. So you can absolutely use all that other hardware with our services. It's just, it's going to be a different user experience.
And within the live appliance, we do use AJA Corbett 88s to take the SDI in. So we're very familiar with these other companies. We monitor them very closely. And in some cases, we do use them.
For me, a big selling point was the Zixi. So, so for me, the thing that is a big deal is, I find that SRT and Zixi are almost exactly the same until the bandwidth gets low and fluctuates. So where we see Zixi really handle things really well is in a highly fluctuating bandwidth connection that is under 10 megs. Where it tends to, keep on giving us frames and bits, where the SRT, we don't always get that. And so that's where, it's kind of, when on a rainy day, that's what you want to have there. And so having that, and then having that automatically, because usually there's a lot, we've been using Zixi for a long time. So there's lots of wrappers and things that we had to deal with and things we had to figure out. So having a box that just does it is a big deal. Also for us, just being able to open it, again, being able to mail it out, and know that there's no configuration that the other side has to do unless they have to put a static IP in. Like other than that, they just plug it in and turn it on. To me and to Own I Know, for us, it's been valuable, so we can just send these things out without, like if I was going to do a service at a bar, I would not send them anything other than a link, because I'm like, it's sitting in the back of the bar, you plug the HDMI cable in or the SDI cable in, and then it will go. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to push a button. You don't have to log into it. You don't have to know anything about it. I'm going to run that for you. And that's the big thing is providing a service where I can send things out to people and they don't need to know anything about it except what to plug in where. And there's power, there's video, and then there's the internet cable, and that's it. And then after that, and that's been the thing that has been, again, as someone who's sent the larger appliances all over the world. And, we have things that you can't get connected and you can't figure out why. And is it the Ethernet 0 or Ethernet 1? And where can you connect it to the service connection? There's all these, things that we've had to deal with. And so, over thousands of events, and that's what makes the link so, this would have made my last decade a lot easier. Next question. Yeah, go ahead.
This, just to add, like this last year has been like the greatest test of that, right? You're talking about companies that now have to work around working from home. We've had links sent out to yoga instructors who set them up for their yoga, live streaming their yoga classes, news reporters, just all over the place. People who are not technical experts with a home internet connection are doing like really nice, high quality, near broadcast grade live streaming from their house.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question. Can't hear you there, Chris. I think you're muted.
So sorry. Rupert McRae from Dallas, Texas says, is the Elemental Media Live pipeline any different in efficiency in different AWS regions? And can AWS Outposts be used as part of the pipeline to help efficiency?
We don't tie in with Outposts at the moment. That may change in the future, but we don't tie in with Outposts. The regional use cases are really for contributing in. So you can now move your link into different regions. So wherever your event is going to be coming from, you want to be as close to the region that you're contributing to. From there, you can use Media Connect to get across the world. But all of our regions will support you if Media Live is supported there in the same way.
And there's no change in efficiency except with cost efficiency in some cases. Other regions cost different amounts. Obviously, the best thing to do is to be contributing video to your most local region. But besides that, there's no difference in our services, across regions.
And how much of a difference does the region make as far as stability and so on and so forth?
Not a huge difference. I've hosted things in US West 2 while I'm at IBC, and
right.
No one noticed the difference.
Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael says, how could you see AWS Ground Station fitting into Elemental workflows? Could you download a DVB-S2 video stream from a satellite and pipe it into Media Live to create an RTMP or SRT feed?
So we looked at that a little bit a couple years ago, but the way Ground Station is working is it's really for.
Can you explain Ground Station?
What's that?
Can you explain Ground Station for our
Ground Station is basically for downloading satellite, low orbit satellite information, right? As they pass over that ground station, constantly going. So it's only connected for a number of minutes, which is why it doesn't exactly work the same way when you think of a broadcasting satellite, which is higher orbit and, easily maintain a connection to. So it's not exactly the same type of service. So while it is potential that you could get a feed for a certain number of minutes, it's not how we would do a major broadcast.
Next question. Oh, can't hear you again. There you go.
Yeah. So here's what's going on. So everybody knows, because I'm getting 100 messages on Discord. I have no idea. But right before I took over, I had a very bizarre Zoom crash. I think I need to restart my system.
I'll take over the questions for now. I'll let you restart your system. Okay,
I will see you tomorrow then. Have a great day. I'm going to go restart my world.
All right, thanks. Rupert McRae from Dallas, Texas says, is there any pre-built cross-connect or handoff available from Media Live to the switch? And I'm assuming the switch is the company, The Switch, that does backhaul and so on and so forth.
It's not part of our service, but the ability to entitle feeds from Media Connect make it really, really simple, because the switch will have their AWS account. So to get something to the switch is a simple entitlement where you enter their account number and the region and give them the feed. So if you have more questions about that, you can definitely reach out to me.
I'll have to talk to them about that too. I haven't. So have you done that? I mean, I've never thought of streaming to the switch. I mean, we use it as a baseband to baseband service. And so I haven't thought about, you can actually stream to the switch.
You can hand off the feed in Media Connect to any customer.
Oh, any customer. But do you know people that are doing it to the switch? They have that ingest? Interesting.
Yeah, I don't want to speak too much about our customers directly, but yep.
Okay. Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. He said, I noticed that the Elemental LiveView L800 appliances can accept SDI signals, but don't have BNC connectors on the back. Is the SDI card available as an option?
We only will support the Corbett 88 inside our live appliances. So
right. I don't know what that option. Can accept but don't have BNC connectors on the back. But they do have BNC. Oh, maybe it's are the micro BNCs? So you have a little pigtail.
Yeah, so you would need an adapter. Yep.
Yeah. You get used to them. I have little bags of them.
Yep.
I have bags of those adapters because you're terrified of not having. Is it the S? No, I haven't had the DIN 10s or whatever, but yeah, we have a lot of them. Next question is from Douglas Carmichael as well. And by the way, we're running, if you have a couple last questions, we have a couple spaces left here. Douglas Carmichael also asks, L800 specification sheets mentions SCTE 35 and add insertion and ESAM support. What is that, and is that connection an external add layout system?
So you can use our API either in our live appliance or within Media Live to inject SCTE messages. So splice inserts, things like that, where you're calling out an ad break. So that's what that's used for. The ESAM is used with a POIS server, to manipulate that SCTE message. So if you know what you're sending out to your POIS server and you make that connection inside your appliance, we're able to manipulate that ad marker before it goes out of the outputs. So that's what that use case is. That is not supported the same way in Media Live, though.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael as well. He said, how do users manage the Elemental Live L800 appliances? Do you provide SSH root access to the device, or is it only web interface? How do you handle security patches?
So we release new software pretty much monthly for the live appliance, and that's available inside our console now. So you're able to just download those onto the device and run the updates. Whether it's underlying Linux updates or it's our Elemental software updates, you're able to access both. And we do allow SSH to the unit as well as provide a web GUI.
And I've done mostly the web GUI. Also, it accepts REST, so you can build a lot of things into it that will just talk to the Elemental and tell it because if I'm correct, the web GUI is just a REST interface, right? That anything it can do, you can do. You could write
via the API. Yep, absolutely.
API.
And then we also have a product called the Conductor, where if you're managing a fleet of these live appliances, you might want to run a Conductor pair to monitor all of those and control them all, so you're not individually controlling the appliance. So again, using the API.
Next question is from Rupert McCrae. He said, what is the Elemental technical support model, and are there different support levels available?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. We have two different support models inside AWS. One has to do with our services in the cloud, and one has to do with our Elemental physical appliances, excluding the links. So when you deal with a link, you're dealing with the AWS security model, which is 4 different tiers: basic, developer, business, or enterprise. Each with have different SLAs of when you'll be able to get help from our teams and our support teams. And those can be as low as 15-minute response time with the enterprise support. With Elemental, we build support around the appliances themselves. So you'll have like a 2 or 3 year support agreement with us. And that will give you dedicated access to our Elemental support team for those physical appliances, as well as cover the appliance itself in case of a defect.
That's great. Next question is also from Douglas Carmichael. It said, L800 specification sheet mentions various standards for captions, including teletext. Is that a European standard? How do you bring captions to a stream generally?
Yeah, so you can have embedded captions that is European. So we do support kind of global caption requirements for our different customers. And as new captions come out, we always look to support the latest and greatest, but for the most part, our customers will run embedded captions into the SDI, and then we'll be able to extract those. Usually we're kicking out web VTT or something for HLS. It's most of the workflows.
And typically to embed those live, folks like us use the EEG 491.
Yeah, very popular. Yep,
Yeah,
very popular to do that. Calls out to a service. There's a live captioner. We're getting that feedback into the EEG, and so that's embedding it into your SDI, and then from there we can take it up to your final destination.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the challenges that we've had recently is doing play out with captions turns into a little bit of a challenge. To embed stuff into the SDI and have it all come through. So it's hoping someday we can have it some kind of external input for that process. Next question is from Rachel Ann Clifton. She said, can you walk us through the appliance itself, showing us the ports and plugs and air venting, etc.? Do you guys have one sitting there? Mine's on.
Yeah,
we have a link, but not a live appliance.
Oh, the live appliance. Yeah. We would not be able to.
They're rack mounted units. They're 1RU.
Yeah.
I can send a link in the chat here to the resources where you can see all the spec sheets, which do have images of the IO configurations, if that's helpful.
And then for Link, yeah, we have one right here. So, pretty standard, few LEDs on the front, LCD screen. That's a new addition. And then on the back, it's hard to see with cables because this one's actually running, but we have a 12G SDI input, an HDMI 2.0 input, Ethernet, screw-in power plug, and then a USB power port.
Will 3 of those fit across a 1U, or are they a little too big for that?
3 fit exactly.
Oh, okay.
Just need to make sure
it might have been the spec.
Just needs a little air gap on top.
Right. Very good. Yeah. It's good. There was another appliance that I had used that was just a little bit bigger than we needed for 2. And you were just like, you put so many in here. So that's great. That's fantastic. Next question. Douglas Carmichael asks, when I mentioned lack of BNC connectors, I was looking at the spec sheet. I think we already went through that. And I think we're gonna, let's see here. I'm just trying to find a couple. There's a lot of here. lot of L800, which is not really what we're talking about today. I was looking for, Douglas Carmichael asks, what is the Zixi push protocol? Can you push Elemental Live Appliance to encode a raw stream, which Zixi then can transcode and distribute?
Yeah, so we use Zixi from the Live Appliance that will, or the link essentially, and that basically gives you forward error correction with ARQ, and that's going to help if you lose a bit here and there. We're going to be able to do that recovery for you, and that can push to any Zixi receiver or Media Connect directly, where we can essentially unwrap that Zixi and take care of your transport stream.
The next question is also from Douglas Carmichael. The Live Appliance supports SMPTE 2010 for video, but also NMOS for connection management and discovery. What is NMOS and when is it used?
So when you're dealing with 2110, you need to create SDP files, which are kind of large text files telling you where the ins and outs of this feed are, the information about the feed itself, the color space, the bit rate. NMOS allows you to have a centralized controller for all of those feeds, so you can see the inputs and outputs on your network. So it was really designed to help manage large fleets of 2110 feeds when it's not a simple SDI cable, it's somewhere on your network and it's kind of hard to find. So it helps with discovery and registration of which feeds are going to go to which destinations. And
I'm curious as to what you're seeing as far as 2110 penetration. That comes up in our conversation about once a day or once every couple of days. we talk about 2110 versus NDI and other things, but where do you see where's from Amazon's perspective or AWS's perspective of where is 2110 going?
So it's ramping up very, very quickly. We're getting questions about it daily now from customers. So it's moving very, very quickly. And now that we're supporting things like JPEG XS contribution using 2110 into the cloud from a Live Appliance, it's really, we're bridging the gap between cloud and on-premises.
And can you explain that so you can go from a Live Appliance and go the JPEG XS into the cloud?
Correct. Yeah. So if you have a direct connect and you have one of those 10 gig direct connects that we talked about earlier, you're able to use that bandwidth and send either a JPEG XS compressed feed or a CDI uncompressed feed into Media Connect to begin those cloud workflows where uncompressed is needed. On the Live Appliance, you have a compression ratio for JPEG XS. So you're able to go all the way down to 1:12 compression. So, 1:2, 1:4, 1:8, kind of all the way down.
Right.
So you're able to get, a visually lossless feed up into the cloud.
And what's the maximum resolution right now?
I believe it's 2160p.
Uh-huh. Oh, very good.
21p60 rather.
And is it 2160? It's or 60, not. And there's no. Just out of curiosity, is there any support for 120?
Not to my knowledge. No.
Right. Okay. Very good. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you guys coming on. I hope you enjoyed it. So it's always good.
Great group of questions. Thank you. I appreciate them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're gonna, for those of you watching, we're gonna be doing more AWS probably once a month. We're going to work out the schedule, but we're going to probably do it on Wednesdays to accommodate some schedules. So, but hopefully we'll get you guys to come in every once in a while and check in on our AWS conversations. We love having you, and a lot of users here. so it's always good to have that there. Thanks to our panelists for the great answers and our producers for all the great questions. It's always a pleasure. Every day you never know what you're going to get. So we come in here, we don't know what the questions are going to be or how it's going to work, and it works out every single day. 400 and I don't know. Does anyone know how many? It's like 470 or 480 times that we've tried this little experiment. So anyway, so thank you all again. Thanks to Joel, Brian, and Matt. Thank you for joining. It was really, really great to have you. And we'll see you all either tomorrow, where we're going to talk about working with C-suite talent, or we'll see you in a couple minutes in the post show. All right. See you, everybody. All right. Thanks.